Welcome to Adventures in Solitaire. Today we'll be discussing a tutorial, or primer, on conjecture and oracles for solo role-playing. Alright, so as mentioned in the intro, I wanted to talk a little bit about oracles and conjecture. I think it's important to note that even if you don't know what an oracle is or you don't know what conjecture is, this is a good place for you. If you're listening to this video and you're having a hard time with the concept of oracles and conjecture and you know what these things are, but you're just not finding that they're working for you, I still think you're in a good place here today. And that is at least my hope, because the intent of this video is to help get you over that hump of discomfort or lack of knowledge. I had to suffer for a couple of years on and off before I found my place and my level of comfort. And right now, the solo role playing gives me a sense of reward, and it takes me to a place that I didn't even know I didn't even know that place existed. Like, if you could have told me what it was, but to be told and to feel what it feels like, to have what a truly good solo experience can be like as a role player, are two different things. I was so separate in my head from what I thought solo role playing was to what it is, that they're just completely disconnected. And had I had any idea of the reward that it offered me, I probably would have tried it a lot more. And so when I say it took me a couple of years, I mean that I had no help from anybody. I was just doing random searches on forums and, looking at videos and whatnot. And I just was getting nowhere. And so I would try for a day or two and give up for months on end. So, it wasn't 2 years straight trying, but it took me a long time. So my hope is that if you're listening to this now, that I can use some of those struggles that I had and what I have found in the process with others and with myself to maybe help you get to a better place. That may not happen today, but that's my hope, and that's what I'm going to attempt to do for you. So I'm going to start with really basic before we move on. What is an oracle? An oracle is any system or anything that would give you an answer to a question. At least that is my definition. Give you an answer to a question. So it could be a yes, no, which is a closed-ended question, or it could be something where it's like, what exists beyond this wall? Now that's open-ended because a yes or a no won't handle it. So an oracle will answer those questions. And there's tons of different types of oracles out there. But in order for these oracles to work well, you have to be familiar with a concept that I like to call, and others have called before me, conjecture. Okay? So let's show an oracle that's a simple yes, no. Is there someone behind the door? 1 through a 3 would be a yes, a 4 through a 6 would be a no. There is someone behind the door. But if we want to know, or something behind the door, if we want to know what that something or that someone is, a yes/no question won't get it. So we need something that's going to tell us that. Now, if you're playing a pre-scripted adventure, then it's going to tell you. But if you're playing a pre-scripted adventure, unless it's a choose your own adventure style, like this Destiny Quest book here, which that's not really going to be your actual solo role playing. That's just a choose your own adventure role playing. If it's scripted, you're going to know what happens before it happens, and there's no fun there. So the only way that we can get around that is to use open-ended oracles, okay? Here I have oracles that give you action words, theme words, descriptor words, and focus words. And so you can choose any of these. Any of these will probably do. But what you'll do is you'll roll up. So you're going to roll in these tables. And let's say I rolled bolster, prize, obscured, refuge. So bolster, prize, obscured, refuge. What does that mean? So you might write down the words that you roll: bolster, prize, secure, refuse, or refuse. So I might say that this is a secure location, and that what's behind there is protecting some sort of a prize. And they're refusing it, and it's refusing entry. But I still might need to know what it is. So I might roll again till I get a descriptor that might help me with understanding, or roll enough descriptors that might help me with an understanding of what it is. 98, untamed. So it's something that's untamed, it's wild. 92, subsurface, so something that would dwell underneath the ground. And if that's not enough within your fantasy world or your science fiction world that you don't know what it is, you can still keep rolling maybe. So 7, it's archaic, it's old. So again, you roll and you continue to roll until what comes forward out of these makes sense. But I have found that despite describing it in this way, that's sometimes not enough. And honestly, it wasn't really enough for me either. So I found a different way of looking at it, and hopefully this will help out. But I'm sure that we've all heard, or a lot of us have heard of this concept of a redacted document. And just in case you haven't, a redacted document is basically a document that has everything marked out except for a few things that you're allowed to see. It's a secure document, and this is what you're allowed to see of this classified document, okay? And in this particular, as an example, in this particular classified document, we have abandoned, deadly, decay, and breach, okay? That's the only words that I'm able to read in this redacted document. So with those being the only words, if this is all I had, if somebody gave this to me and this was a redacted document, I would not know what in the heck they were talking about. I would have to ask, what's this in reference to? How am I supposed to make any meaning out of this? Abandoned, deadly, decay, breach? What the heck, man? What are you talking about? But if I were to say, well, this document has to do with somebody who's trying to transport something on an offshore rig. It has to do with transportation of something in an offshore rig. And then I already read this again, and it's modern times, by the way. Abandoned, deadly, decay, breach. Well, they're trying to transport something in an offshore rig. I'm assuming that it's not legal. Something's going on. That the offshore rig is abandoned. Something is decaying. It's going to be deadly, maybe. And it's been breached. So maybe they're trying to transport something. What would that be? Maybe it could be a toxin or something nuclear, like something fissile. Maybe that's what that is. I can begin to understand what these words might mean in reference to what they're talking about. This redacted document now actually has meaning. But if I were to take this same document and then I were to say, okay, this is actually there's a store manager that's having a problem, and we're trying to figure out what it is, but the only thing that company was willing to get, or that we could get from the company, was this redacted document. Well, they're dealing with a problem, this manager. What is it? Something about abandoned, something's deadly, something's decaying, something breach. I imagine it has to do with probably food that's decaying, that's deadly. The food's been breached somehow. And then abandoned, I would assume that the food had been abandoned for a while or something like that. I don't know. But we have an idea, right? We have an idea of what these words could mean. And the words are exceptionally contextual. They're contextual not just to where we're at. They're contextual to when, where, whom, what's happened before, all of the events that are currently going on right now. And as we play through our games, let's say in the situation with the store, maybe we actually knew more when we got the redacted document. Maybe we knew, yes, that the manager was having to deal with a problem, and that the store actually had been evacuated from the people had left the store, and that let's say that he's the only one on site right now, and he's actually outside. And that this issue has been going on for maybe only the past 24 hours, right? This is a ton of information that, if we had that, would make these words mean so much potentially more to us. So if we were to then ask, what is it that why is he outside? What's going on? And we rolled these. Why is the store empty? And why is there a manager outside? And we were to roll this, we could say, well, abandoned, store's been abandoned from something deadly, something's decaying, there was a breach. Okay, something had been breached within the store. So I would probably move away from food at that point and go to natural gas. That there's a natural gas break. Okay, that's probably what I would go to. And if I'm not sure and I really want to press it, I can ask if I'm right with a yes or a no question. Right? If I think that I'm putting too much of myself in there for that. So that's just another way to kind of look at these rolls. You know, you may roll 4 rolls, you may roll 2, you may roll 6. It's gonna be it's gonna depend on the words that you roll, how much they align to that situation. You may find yourself in a situation where the word abandon just doesn't make any sense to what you're going through, and in that case, redact that and just run with what does make sense, and then go with that, or roll another word if you need to help get just a little bit more. Okay, so I talked about words, but maybe that's still not there for you, and so this is probably where we need to talk about tools, because if you're familiar with this and you're still having problems, for whatever reason those words are not transforming into ideas. If you're having a hard time making one word mean several different things, or you're having a hard time obfuscating that word to be a little bit more, then you might want to start looking at something different. It may mean that you're not wired for words like that, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm not, I know. I'm sorry. I am wired for words like that, but I have a friend online who does not seem to be wired that way, and so for him, he uses pictures. He actually has a whole bunch of magic cards, and he'll get a deck, he'll shuffle them up, and he'll just pull pictures instead of words. So whereas I might roll a dice that says forest, he would draw up, and forest for me can mean lots of things. It may not even mean a literal forest. It may mean a forest of thoughts or ideas. But he'll draw a picture of the forest, and for him, he can extract a lot of different ideas off of that image. I can't. I am way too literal with pictures, and I can't diverge like that. I can't get that picture to mean more than what it is. And so pictures are very inflexible for me in a way that words are so much more flexible for me in their potential meaning to the situation that I'm in, for the questions that I'm asking. So if you find that these words aren't doing it, you might just test yourself with some pictures. Like draw a picture. Okay, it has something to do with the forest. Okay, draw another picture. Okay, so there's a guy wielding a sword. What could that mean? So that's a threatening idea or something. Maybe somebody's being attacked. And then you draw another one. Okay, so this one is a picture of a dilapidated building. So that might, and you start putting these pictures together to form a story. And so if you're having a hard time with that with the words, it may mean that where you live is right here in the imagery. Right? So there's different ways that we all experience imagery. It may be very visual. It may be very much language based. So there's no right or wrong in either method. The right of the method is the method that works for you, that you're getting what you need. So if you have been knocking your head against the wall with these, take some time and try some pictures. If you've been trying to do the picture approach and you're hitting the wall there, you may be like me where you're too literal. That you may want to go ahead and try for those words. But to go back to conjecture, the whole principle for conjecture is, again, you are taking words, you're trying to apply meaning to the multiple words you roll, you continue to roll more words or draw more pictures if you're doing pictures, until they make sense in a way that might answer your question. And the other key important part about conjecture is you have to apply logic to it. It must be logical, right? I mean, you want to be careful with that concept. I mean, you don't want to be pure logic all the time. You definitely want to allow for some chances of surprise. But for the most part, it's what makes sense. If someone were talking to me in code, right, with a redacted information, what would that possibly mean to me? You know, what if like Roger, you know, Falcon flying Tuesday, what does that mean? You know, what do those words on that radio mean, that garbled static? Well, I have to know the situation for what those words mean. Or if I'm just seeing a few images on a broken TV and there's a story and I know it's science fiction and they're in space, what are those few pictures fill in for the story? Because the rest of it's all garbled. There's something wrong with the video. The next thing, the next thing I want to kind of talk a bit about is we talked a bit about visual oracles, word-based oracles. We talked about open-ended oracles, yes/no oracles. There's also variable yes/no oracles. You can also, I've seen it done where there's story generators, where there's just a list of different or story starters, where you have tables and lists of full like small paragraph entries of things to get stories started, right? You can do those as well. Additionally, some people will get a book that's on theme. They'll open to a page and just stop and they'll read until that makes sense for their situation. I don't prefer to do that personally. That's a little off-putting for me. That's not where I live, but you can do that. If you don't mind electronics, they have story-based AIs where you literally can ask the AI a question and it will fill you in on the story, which is nice. I think there was an Android app for that. I forgot the name off the top of my head, so forgive me for that. But there's all sorts of options there to kind of fill that in. But once you get to a point where you found a role-playing system that you like, that not too complicated, but not too shallow, and that's going to vary. For you, the rule system may be incredibly simple. Or for you, it may mean that it's incredibly complicated. Incredibly complicated for me, it gets onto the realm of like D&D. That is not a system meant for solo. Can it be soloed? Absolutely. Is that where I live? No. Do I like D&D? Absolutely. I'm not a big fan of it for solo. But that doesn't mean that you can't solo it, and all of these concepts still apply to it. Every last one of them. For that matter, I'm not a big fan of the Cepheus engine solo, but I'm a fan of Hostile solo. But it's also it's a more simplified version of that Cepheus system. So find a system where you live, where you're comfortable, where you like those rules, and they're not too hard, not too easy. And then start working with oracles. I would recommend you print off some online, or you try some free digital oracles as well, just to get your feet wet. Most of us have access to cards with pictures. You can try that too. If you don't have any oracles to print and you don't want to do the online thing, then you can still use this book method that was I shown before and just start touching words. Pale, cabin, curious, craftsmanship. There, right? It's not going to be as fine-tuned as, say, oracles like these books have, but it'll still do the job if you're ill-stretched for time or for funds. Additionally, as mentioned in one of my other some of my other videos, there's cards available. These are probably one of the best. I'll be honest, in my solo role playing, I don't actually have to use these. I'm good with some oracles, some dice, and a really basic role-playing system. They work just fine for me. I don't have to have these, believe it or not. But these provide you a ton of different types of oracles. I don't know how you would need much more than this, but for me, these are a bit too busy for my eyes, and it distracts me. So, but I'm glad I have them, but I rarely have to even think about pulling these out for any system. But that may not be where you are, and there are people who get a lot out of these. I've just found that I don't use these as much as I could. So that's, and then there are people that will play that. There are role players that will play that won't even use these, where these are all that they need, and they're perfectly fine with generating from what's in their own head. That is not where I live. I want to be surprised, and I don't want it to come from me as much as possible. I want it to come from the ether somewhere, right? And that's what these tools do for me. They give me that context from the ether, and they can do it very quickly, right? And if you feel like you're not getting your information quick enough, either one, you're not in the right place. You're either doing pictures when you should be doing words, or doing words where you should be doing pictures, right? It could be that, or it could be something as simple as you need to exercise your head in that space a little bit more. So when you know that this is too complicated for you, for your head to formulate ideas, and you know this is easier, but you're still having a hard time, spend a little bit more time with it. And what's going to happen is your head's going to start learning how to do that, whether you like it or not. And it's going to get better at doing it, whether you like it or not. That's just what our brains do. You will get better at doing it by natural process, and it's just going to come. And you're going to find out what works best as to how long do I need to roll, and how do I want to use those words. For example, something else that I'll sometimes do, not all the time, but sometimes, especially if I'm playing cooperative, is I will take those words and I'll just put them together. And then what I'll do is I'll assign numbers to them sometimes so that I structure them almost as if they're a sentence, right? Or I'll just lay them as they are as a sentence, right? And if it doesn't form a sentence, I may keep rolling until there's enough words there that starts to make sense for me. This is why the numbered system works better, because I can reorganize those words however I want to form a sentence. So sentence-based rolling will work sometimes. More often than not, I don't. More often than not, I'll just roll and I'll work it out in my head without having to take the extra time to go on paper. But I wasn't always living there. For a while, I had to write them down on paper as my sole means of getting information. But and figuring what that information does for me. So anyway, hopefully that answers some of your questions there as far as what conjecture really looks like, how you can use it, your different options for that, maybe a little bit deeper than I've gone before. I think what I would like to get from the community is, beyond that, what difficulties are you having with solo? You know, if it's an issue of finding tools, that's probably one of the hardest things that we as solo role players can have to deal with. And unfortunately for that one, all we can do for each other is to recommend tools. But understand that when somebody recommends a tool to you, that's their recommendation, and they don't know where you live. That tool may work for you, it may not work for you. And so we're right back where we began in the first place before somebody recommended something. And we're there where we're just trying these tools out and seeing if they work. A recommendation is great because it maybe it's something you've never heard of before, you know, and you might want to try it out. But I would say, if you're just starting out, start with pictures, start with your words. That's where I live, and I've had to go no further. I did not have to go any further. I did not have to have a whole bunch of other stuff, and some people need even less than that, and good on them for that. I can't do for less. I know where I live, and I know where I'm happy, and it's a beautiful place to be. I can only hope that you can that you yourself can get there, or you're close to getting there. And like I said, if you guys have any questions about this, or you're having some specific difficulties, I can try to give you some recommendations. Just understand that they may not fit for you. You'll just have to try them out and see if that's where you live. And but otherwise, I appreciate it if you've listened all the way through to this point, or not, as always. And hopefully we'll be seeing you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.